A new report that claims the number of migrant children in U.S. detention centers has increased dramatically.
The New York Times says the federal shelters are near capacity, housing close to 13,000 minors this month. Compare that to May of 2017, when there were 2,400 children in the detention centers. The paper says the huge influx is due to a reduction in the number being released to live with families and other sponsors. They say most of the children crossed the border alone. To discuss, let's bring in Rahul Manchanda, an immigration attorney, joining us here on set. Great to have you again. Rahul, let's explain a couple of points. The story has gotten off the headlines lately. We thought there was a court order and that this method of detaining children is no longer, and now the New York Times says in the highest levels ever. How come?
Well, you know, that's one of the issues here. It's one of those unresolved matters that's still going on. And, you know, it's sort of the gift that keeps on giving in this situation. It's definitely a political football at this point as well. The Democrats and the Republicans are both using it. You know, the conservatives, Republicans are tossing it back to the Republicans, saying that this happened under the Obama administration with Jay Johnson, the Secretary of DHS. You know, and then, you know, the Trump administration is turning it back and saying we're actually doing something about it. You know, we're taking action. You know, the judge actually gave them a deadline that they substantially complied with, although there are about 600 or 700 kids still not paired off with their parents. So it's an awful political situation right now, but both sides are using it right now.
Is there a silver lining to the fact that, okay, these 13,000 minors, at least they have a safe, supposedly safe place where the government is technically looking after them?
Well, you know, that's a great question. The problem is that, you know, what is the saying? If you want something to be done wrong, have the government do it. You know, the problem is that it's a situation that was created by the government. Now they're trying to rectify it and fix it. But, you know, really at the end of the day, it's about human beings and children. And unfortunately, a lot of the parents are no longer here. Some of them are incarcerated. Some of them have voluntarily given up their children. You know, it's incredible. And some of them actually have voluntarily decided to just, you know, renounce their children and leave them here to the mercy of the system. So,
can you explain the claim that appears in this article that most of the children cross the border alone?
Well, not most, a substantial amount do. I mean, you know, that's one of the problems that the administration was facing. You know, how do they vet who the parents were? Some of them were not even really their parents. Some of them may or may not have been relatives. Some of them may have been coyotes, smugglers, if you will. So, you know, part of the problem here has been the DNA testing. And a lot of the people have been complaining about the fact that children would appear in front of a judge unaccompanied, maybe without an attorney, representing themselves. In fact, what may have been occurring was DNA testing, which had to be judicially mandated. So sometimes you may or may not need counsel, and they would, you know, allow for their, you know, guardians to sort of, you know, DNA test them, because it was absolutely essential to determine if the persons that were accompanying them were actually their parents or relatives. So that was part of the problem as well.
I wonder if you can clarify something that you just touched on, and that is, you mentioned 500 or 600 or so minors that still remain separated from their families. These 12,000, some of them would be with their families. Some of them, there are no families to be reunited with. Right.
Well, you know, a lot of the parents are deceased, dead. Some of them are not here. Some of them are completely displaced. Some of them are lost within the system. So this is never going to be a completely solved issue.
Well, what happens to these children?
Well, that's the tragedy. You know, what was ironic about this is in the last couple of months, the New York City, you know, shelters have determined that they actually had more children than they thought. First was a couple hundred, now maybe a couple thousand. And Mayor de Blasio has set up a unit with the New York City Department to determine what's going on, because a lot of them came here to New York City. You know, they were busting from Texas or Florida, you know, California, and all the way up to New York City. So what are they doing here in the Northeast, you know, thousands of miles away from the original location?
How long can the children stay in those detention centers?
Well, you know, according to the law, 90 days is how long you can keep somebody in detention, you know, before they're released, you know, with bail or, you know, ROR. With children, it's a completely different story. You know, that's part of the problem. They've actually paroled them into these shelters. So there really is no timeline for children.
But what's the solution? Like those 10 cities in Texas?
Well, the solution is what they're doing now, slowly getting towards that zero asymptotical goal of no children left behind. But to be very blunt with you, I've been practicing immigration law for almost 20 years, and I don't really see an end in sight. There's going to be a few hundred kids out there that are completely without their parents.
Well, it also
and
sounds
it's going to be
like
a tragic story at the end of the day.
It also sounds like they're having a greater number of people who are ending up in the shelters now than they are solving their cases and getting them out. So the number keeps growing.
Absolutely, and you got to wonder, you know, some of these shelters, you know, get a stipend per child from the federal government. You got to look into that as well. So there may be a profit issue here. Not that I'm making any statements about that, but the bottom line is, are they really trying? The bottom line is they're getting funding for this, and so maybe something that that needs to be looked into as well.
Rahul Manchanda, he's an immigration attorney. Rahul, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.